And I'm not sure whether I'm the expert on private pensions as such. But yes, I do have some pension experience over the years, I think 35 years now, but not so much in Romania. It has been over 10 years that I was for the last time, and that was the first time, here in Poiana, but that was as a tourist. And I have not really studied Romanian pensions, to be honest. My brother lives in Romania, so I am quite regularly here in Romania, but that is in Cluj. Still, he is not retired. He isn't really teaching me about Romanian pensions. So sorry for my lack of knowledge of Romanian pensions, but what I wanted to do is to share with you some information from the European Commission on pensions in general, and pointed at first pillar pensions in the first place, and then move on to some other developments that I think are of importance. And then I will share some suggestions, some views that I have personally, and not representing the Actuarial Association of Europe or anybody else, but just myself. And then, well, let's see whether that is of use for you as well, can perhaps help you think through your own development in the pensions industry in Romania. Well, I am chair of the pensions committee of the Actuarial Association of Europe. We are representing the European actuaries, around 22,000 actuaries in Europe. And I think what is most important for me is that in our vision statement it says it is about contributing to the well-being of society. And hopefully you will see some elements of this in my further presentation. Well, as I already said, I will cover first pillar pensions and mainly the aging report of the European Commission, then some impactful developments and share my personal perspective. The aging report, who has read it? Who knows about it? This is being published every 3 years by the European Commission. It is a lengthy document, and it is about the development of the population in Europe and what it means for the financing of social security systems in Europe. And that kicks in for the budget of Europe and the national countries, the national budgets as well. In the Commission, this is done by Financial and Economic Affairs. That is a special group within the Commission. There's another group about social elements, and they have produced as a kind of response to this financial report an adequacy report, which is about, well, is there still enough money for people to live when they are retired? And when you look at that in total, it is over 1,600 pages. This is produced for a lot of people, amongst others, people at the Commission itself, but also members of Parliament. And we thought, well, members of Parliament are generally not interested to read all those 1,600 pages, so let's produce a summary of it. And that is what we have done with this brochure. You see the front page, The Aging of the EU and Implications for Pensions. It's only 48 pages, and it includes a summary of those big reports of the European Commission, and has also some actuarial comments to it. And my presentation now, the first part, is a summary of this summary, basically, as I have to keep it short. Well, let's first look at the results of this aging report. The overall projecting of public costs. And when I look at that, yeah, I don't know whether I can point at it. No, that's a bit difficult. But when I look at the total, there is a rise in costs. This is 2013, the base year, and 2060, the costs are higher. But when we just look, and that is the topic for today, pensions, it is fine. The costs now are 11.3 of GDP and will go a little bit down even to 11.2. That was different with the former report 3 years ago. There was a steep increase in pension costs. And well, I will go through it, how this is found and what the underlying elements are, and well, make some remarks to it, because perhaps it's not as nice as it looks from this summary page. There are a couple of drivers of the development of the population in Europe. One of the drivers is fertility. How much babies do we produce, basically? Fertility sounds always nice in a way, but it is about producing babies. And, well, the number of babies has come down dramatically in almost all countries. They are not all listed here, but the major countries are listed. And the Commission is making a projection. So we are now somewhere here and is projecting it forward to 2060. And projections are always, well, kind of nice, flat, going to a certain level. And the level that the Commission has chosen is looking at the level of the UK and Sweden. Why? I don't know, but the Commission has decided, the experts at the Commission have decided, well, that seems to be a point where all countries in Europe will converge to. And whether or not that is true, I don't know. Well, I would almost say it is not realistic, but I, on the other hand, do understand that you need to make some estimations, and that is what they have done. When I look to Romania, you are nicely in the middle because this is sorted, and you are somewhere over there, which is below the 2, and I think we need 2.1 to have a stable population in a country or in a region. But we are all in Europe below that. So our population is shrinking from this perspective. That is something we should keep in mind. Oh, I've highlighted Romania. Then, the second driver of 3 is the aging of the population. We are living longer and longer and longer. And that is also true for all countries, basically. Now, this is in 2013, the starting point of this study. At 65 for males, what is the expectation of life after the year 65? So you have already survived 65 years, and then, well, it is somewhere between 15 and 19 years that you still have to live, on average, of course. People live longer and some shorter after 65. And that will go up. That will go up drastically when you look at that percentage-wise from, say, 18, 19 to 22, 23 years. That's a quite dramatic increase of life expectancy. And that will cost money in some way or the other. When I look then at Romania, you are at the lower end of this graph. So your life expectation, and I'm sorry that I'm not cannot give better news, but is relatively short when you compare it to other European countries. But the good news is it will also go up, and it will go up a little bit faster even than other countries, is the expectation in this study at least. We can look at a similar picture for the female population. Same story, basically. So also the females are living longer and longer. and they already live longer than males. But I think that is no news for you. Romania still at the bottom also in this graph. What the Commission has done is looking at the increase of life expectancy and of mortality rates. And this is a bit of a technical story. We don't have to go deep into that. But what the Commission is not doing is looking at the effect for a whole generation, that a person who is now 70 will live longer due to the current data that we have. But somebody who is now 25 and will reach the age of 70 will live even longer at the age of 70 than is being thought now. What the Commission has not done is taking into account this further increase in life expectation, and that is meant to, well, that is referred to as a cohort life expectation. When you look at the further increase in life expectation for a generation. And there is a big difference. When we look at 65, age 65, for the UK, these are data for the UK because they are not generally available. It is for males 18.7, but on a cohort basis, when you really look to the effects of a further generation, it is even 21.3. On average, about 2.6 years higher even than what the Commission has projected and worked with. So we are even living longer is our expectation as actuaries than what the Commission took into account in their report. So when we saw that the pension costs would be stable, well, perhaps there are some comments to make, and perhaps it will increase because some elements have not been taken into account yet. And that is one of the elements that we are discussing with the Commission, of course, and trying to make these reports from a technical perspective better and better. The third and last driver of the population that has been assessed by the Commission is migration flows. Well, that's a very actual issue, of course, at the moment. And well, we have some doubts whether everything is well projected there. Because take the small country of Luxembourg, the Commission thinks in their projection that their population will almost double, will increase by 85.8%, due to migration only. And, well, I have some doubts whether that will be true. I don't know. But also for Belgium, Italy, Sweden, there are large increases due to migration. When I look to your country, the effect is almost zero. It's a minus 0.2% is what the Commission projects on well, almost 50-year horizon. So that is an important stream. It does affect the figures, and I don't know whether the starting points of the Commission are exactly right, but it is, I've said it before, also extremely difficult to make forecasts and projections because we don't know the future. So you have to make some assumptions, but I could imagine, and that is a remark that we have, that when we look at the current migration flows, that it could also be expected that people will move back once problems in their own region are solved or are getting better. And that is not really included in the figures as the Commission is looking at the recent past, basically. So that is something to keep in mind when looking at final results of such studies. Let's see. And Romania, well, I already pointed at that. Then, when we zoom in a little bit more, we have now a projection of the development of the population in the EU countries. And this is a graph with the old age dependency ratio. This is how many actives are working and financing people who are inactive, who are retired. And at the moment, it is about 3 people are working for one person in retirement. So it's a ratio of 3 to 1. But when you take the whole development of the population into account, that will rise. Well, the graphs are rising, but it means that less active people are supporting people in retirement, or saying it in a different way, there are more people retired and less active people. That goes to about, well, a level of 50%, which would mean 2 persons are working and supporting 1 person in retirement. So basically from 3 to 2 persons. And that gives a pressure, of course, on how to finance retirement pensions in the first pillar. And when we zoom in on your country, Romania, you are more or less in the middle there, but you are starting a bit lower. I think about 4 people can support people in retirement at the moment, and that will move up to about 2 to 3 people. Somewhat better than in the other European countries, I would say. When we would shift this graph, not looking at the age of retirement of 65, but to 70, so we rise the retirement age from 65 to 70, then this graph remains more or less stable, more or less flat. So it would help, that is what this graph would suggest, to raise the retirement age in order to get, well, a kind of balance in the number of people that are active and can support people in retirement. So that could be one of the solutions, and that is also what we see in practice, that many countries are raising their retirement age at the moment. And again, you can look at your own position in this graph. Another way of looking at it is looking at this cohort expectation, this better way in my actuarial perspective of looking at those figures. So looking at all the increases in mortality for a generation. And that gives more or less the same picture when we look at that. We have said, well, at the moment, the life expectation on a cohort basis, we saw it before, was 21.6 for males, years for males at 65. When we go through the years, it has to move up to 70.5 in 2060 in order to have the same expectation, the same remaining life expectation of 21.6. So a person aged 65 now will live 21.6 years as an expectancy, and in 2060, when you reach 70, you still have 21.6 years to live. So there is this same increase, and it would also suggest that a retirement age of 70 could compensate for those effects. And this is just, well, more or less a funny graph, I think, with some numbers on which member states have the largest population according to when you take this all into account. And at the moment it is Germany, which is the largest country in Europe, but it will lose its position and it will be taken over by the UK. But I guess Germany could be happy that the UK considers a Brexit, and then, well, they rise a little bit, although it is still France who will be bigger in 2060, according to these projections, and if they would work out this way, would be bigger than Germany. And well, I have also Romania there. It is always on my slide here because it is one of the biggest countries in terms of number of people. But your population will decrease according to these studies of the European Commission by 13%. So the total population in the EU is projected to increase by 3%. Your population is expected to decrease by 13%. Well, let's look at what it means of the change in population that have a working age, that are actives and can contribute and help support members in retirement. And that will go down in many countries, including your own country, according to this report of the Commission, and go up in some other countries, and, well, Luxembourg at the top, because of this migration projection that is made for Luxembourg. For the total of the EU, a decline of 11.6% is expected, so less people in the working ages, well, you can see that it is a very diverse view over the countries. And when I now go to the pension costs again, I already pointed in one of my first slides that the total pension costs will almost be stable in these projections for the EU on an EU level. In the former report, the 2012 report, this is the 2015 report we are looking at, but the 2012 report, there was an increase on average for the whole of Europe expected of 1%. So there is an improvement. There is less increase, well, even a slight decrease, but it has stabilized. And that is different from the expectations that we had 3 years ago. And you can see the differences per country. And of course, I've highlighted Romania as well. And your increase is also, well, in line with the European average, but it was much higher 3 years ago. So I guess that you have made some changes in your first pillar pension system in order to bring the projected costs down. Is that true? Can you confirm that, or do you recognize it, or? Not really? Well, this is what the European Commission says. I was... No, that's not on this point. Let's go to the next one. And when we look at reforms, and many countries have done reforms in some way, it is raising the eligibility age for public pensions, reductions in accrual rates, career average instead of final salary, less generous indexation, contribution increases, notional defined contribution structures. A lot has happened, but I think in general, both reductions in accrual rates and increasing the retirement age, which is more or less the same, because if you would reduce the accrual rate, well, if you would have the same pension, you need to retire later. So it can be compared to an increase in retirement age. That are the main reform measures. And that results in a further analysis of the Commission, what drives these changes, and I will zoom in on the last one, the benefit ratio, because that makes a link with the adequacy. Do people still have enough money in retirement when they reach retirement age? And this is the change in benefit ratio. And the benefit ratio is the average pension of the population that is retired compared to the average wage of the active part of the population. And that ratio has come down in virtually all EU member states. It is only Luxembourg and Denmark that have an increase, so an improvement of this benefit ratio. So generally speaking, the European Commission expects that people in retirement in 2060 will have a lower pension as compared to the average wage than currently is the case. So they would expect further reductions. And a reduction could also be an increase in retirement age, because that is seen as a reduction. You have to work longer for the same pension. And when I look at Romania, you are here, and the report says a minus 14.5% in this benefit ratio. And this is an important one, because that led to the remark already in this financially driven report, where it says, well, this might lead to social or political challenges. Because if people, and I say it in my own words, if people don't have enough money, that could lead to problems. People will stand up and ask for more or improvements or whatever. And that is why DG Employment, the Employment and Social Affairs part of the Social Commission, came with a kind of response to this financially driven report, and came with the aging report, the adequacy report. And they wanted to highlight adequacy. Do people still have enough money? And their response is simply, well, it is not as easy as it seems to be to look at this, because you have to take into account a lot of things. It is not only pensions. It is not only pensions. It is also, how do you pay for healthcare, for example? Is it paid by the state, or do you have to pay for it yourself? Do you own a house, and is it free of mortgage when you retire, or not? And that is something that should be taken into account. That is what Employment and Social Affairs reports. But when I look at it, it is, I think, clear, no matter how the figures really look like, but the direction of it is more or less clear. We are living longer. There are less people, generally speaking, in the active ages than in retirement. There are more people in retirement. We are living longer. We are in need of additional savings. And further savings, that would mean a decision to sacrifice purchase power now. And are people willing to do that? Because you would build then purchase power in retirement, but, well, that is so far away. That is 20, 30, 40 years away. And generally speaking, people are not really willing to do that. So how can we support that? With tax incentives, with mandatory savings, which always works because it is mandatory. And one of my suggestions would be, well, can we look at ways how we can make that pension money that is meant for later, for 30, 40, 50 years perhaps later, how can we make those savings already relevant now for those people and still have the same purpose of serving us later, but also that we can use it now? And well, I will look at some examples, and sometimes I look around, and this is Singapore, and the Singaporean system. And what I like there is that they have already for decades long made a combination between pension savings, housing, and buying a house and mortgage, etc., where you can combine your pension savings with that, and also healthcare. You can also save for your healthcare, at least for your expected healthcare costs, and only the real high costs that are unexpected and you cannot save for are part of Social Security there. But everything that you can more or less expect are part of the savings pot that they have, and they have three clearly defined savings pots that can well, work together. I cannot go into details, but this link between retirement, home ownership and healthcare is something that I get inspiration from. And when I look in my own country, the Netherlands, I see big reports on this topic. How can we combine pensions, housing and healthcare? And those reports all seem to start with, yes, that's a good idea, we should investigate that. And then the remainder of the report is about, well, but it is not doable because, well, we have legislation such and social security such, and it is not possible. But I think Singapore is showing us it is possible. They have a working system for decades already, so if we want to do it, it is possible to realize it. Another country I'm sometimes looking at is Australia, where you have individual savings on a mandatory basis, and you have a lot of choice. It is not, well, your employer has to pay in, because that is also part of the mandatory system, but you can choose yourself where you want to invest it and how you want to invest it. There are a lot of defaults, but if people, for example, would like, and I see more and more appetite for that, more green investments, for example, do something for your environment, then that is a possibility. People can make their own decisions on that. And that is also something that inspires me and could be an element of making pension money that is meant for later useful now already. You can do now already something for society. And perhaps even for your own environment, your own house. And I have an example that I'm discussing with larger pension funds in the Netherlands at the moment about energy savings, because that is a hot topic, but you can do this same exercise with a lot of topics in my view. One of the problems is there is no engagement of people, of members of pension schemes with their pensions, because it is so far away. People don't feel don't have a warm feeling with their pension money, and they just trust that everything is done well, but they cannot do anything with it. So there is a lack of engagement of people. But people do like to support more and more sustainability, environmental elements. Also the government, in my situation, the Dutch government, but I see that also on a European-wide basis, are putting more and more emphasis on sustainability of the environment, and are asking insurers, pension funds, to consider that and to put part of their money in sustainable investment funds that would support such a development in the country. My idea is, why not bring the decision of that back to the individual members? Why don't we make it possible for individual members to make a decision and to, well, use the internet, push a button and say, yes, I would like that part of my money, and there need to be some restrictions, I guess, but part of my money is invested in green products. And that could also give a nice return. You can even finance solar panels, for example, on your own roof of your house. Do something with the environment, do something with communication with members, because you are already working now with that pension money, and finance your own solar panels. And that is just an example. You can do it with a lot of things. On your own house, you can see them, and that is financed from your money. But the money is still within the insurer or pension fund as part of your pension savings. And well, one of the examples and ideas to make pension savings for later now already relevant. And well, it can be worked out in a nice model where you can really make this work, where the starting point is insurers or pension funds who have the money, have to manage the money, and part of that money could go into an energy fund, but that is then informed by the members of those pension arrangements. They can, via a community platform, we have internet now, we can do a lot there, create social platforms, and that could inform the insurers and pension fund managers to see how much of the money should be used for that, because that is the wish of the members. And well, and then you can have further purchase power to the suppliers, etc., but I won't go into detail there. Yes, well, and another element, and that is also part of the current IRP directive, which is a pension fund directive, so second pillar stuff basically, but they look at third pillar information requirements as well. And that is a personal benefit statement, which is very pension focused, and it gives information about your pension system. But normally, that is the experience in some countries where they already do this. It doesn't really rise the interest of members, because it gives them information about things they are not really close with, they not really understand. In the Netherlands, I've seen examples where people look at their personal benefit statements and see the amount of pension, and they assume that that is the amount that they will get on their bank account net every month. But it is a gross amount on an annual basis. So people are very disappointed that it is much lower in reality. Now, also using the internet, it is possible to look not only at your current pension system, but also other pension systems that you have been in, if that would be the case. So former employers, for example, integrated with state pension information, even if insurers would be willing to share the information with third pillar pension savings, but also look at your other financial elements, as the Commission also is suggesting, at least Social Affairs and Employment is suggesting, to look at other elements. So do you have further assets? Do you have other savings in investment funds or whatever? Or not? That makes a difference. What about your house? Is it your own house, and is it free of mortgage or not? Take that all into account, and then you can make on a net per month, because that is what most people recognize much more than gross on an annual basis. Net per month, all your income, the cost elements. What is the current way you are living? And this picture can be produced in a very quick way if all the information is available. And so if you can download it from your tax filings and your pension information, you can have this picture in it, and then can be or like the situation that it is all green and they have enough, they have more income than expenses, or well, they might have a problem, like in this example. There's a small problem in the beginning, but that is can be solved in this situation. So we have to give more relevant information, not only talk about pensions, which is good and it is necessary information, but then we should integrate it with the broader picture and help people understand, can they live the life they want to live? Because that is, I think, the basic question from them, and not my actuarial things about pensions only. And that will give them information about what to do. And I will go through this very quickly, but some important developments that are not part of the report of the Commission, but I think are very important to look at. That is this worm. It has a gene that is affected, but if you repair it, and there is a solution to that, scientists have been working on that, this worm will live twice as long as it lives now. This gene is also found within rats, another animal, but even within ourselves, human beings. We have the same gene there, with the same defection in it, and it can be repaired. And we have the cure already. It is part even of our medicine for cancer treatment. But then this is not really applied in such a way that we are really living longer, but it is getting closer and closer that the healthcare industry will help us living longer, much longer than is anticipated in all the projections. Further, meet Baxter, your new co-worker. Robots are used and they will take over a lot of work, and not only the mechanical work but also my work, basically, where you need, well, perhaps some intellect will be taken over by computers. IBM Watson is a good example for that in the healthcare industry, for example. Well, healthcare, we will produce a lot of things and robots can help there as well, but this will cost a lot of jobs. But that is not a problem if we could convert the economic welfare that it would bring into monetary terms for everybody, I think. Yeah, I have to, yeah, thank you. Housing, a 3D printed house. Well, it will also be very different in the future. But big developments. These are referred to as the third industrial revolution, as Mr. Rifkin says. And we are, according to those people that are looking into this, somewhere around here. We have seen some developments already in this direction. Perhaps a bit disappointing sometimes that it is not really kicking off 3D printing, for example. Although I've seen a nice example of 3D printing here in Cluj-Napoca, an architect who was working on that basis. And I had never seen such a big 3D printer, but that was very nice to see. So it was actually working in his environment. But it is expected that will grow exponentially. So all these effects will come to us in an exponential way. And that could mean that there are much less jobs available in the near future. How will we distribute the money? And Mr. Rifkin has a suggestion there, and that is something I like. And Mr. Rifkin is also an advisor to the European Commission, by the way, and he talks about basic income. Let's have a basic income for all people in the country or the European area, or well, perhaps we should do this even on a global basis, so that there is no worry for the basic needs. And then we can do a lot of other things to develop ourselves. So that could be a way forward, a basic income as the first pillar, and then a second pillar, more individual, using the money now already. Multiple goals, not only for retirement, but in my view, it is also important to be able to use part of that for education, childcare, start of your own business. Could be different in all situations. But if we make that possible, then we bring it much closer to individual people who could do more than it than now is the case, because they have to wait for it 40 years. I see a very relevant role for innovative insurers and pension funds in this direction. And that is where I want to close my presentation. Thank you.